Zoe, CILLIERS. Too soon. Tell me when.
When you're out exploring the beach, make sure you be careful where you step because, yes, seaweed is slippery, but there is also seagull poop. Hello, my name is Yuko. I am one of the Seaquarists with Seaquaria Ocean Education.
Hello, my name is Zoe. I work for Seaquaria Ocean Education.
Hey, my name is Maia.
Hello, my name is Zoe. I work for Seaquaria Ocean Education, and today I'm out on the low tide at Tod Inlet, also known as Seaquarists. And so this is a place that has a heavy history of human interaction. 100, maybe 150 years ago, this would have been a sort of muddy, sandy estuary. And as you can see today, it may look a little bit different, and that's because of a history of human use, in some cases overuse, pollution, and damage. But it's still a really interesting environment to take a look at because of what is still able to live here despite some of the things in their way. So right next to me is a concrete pillar that used to hold up a really old dock. And so there is still some life living on the side of this pillar. Some really big Japanese oysters, lots of different types of barnacles, and seaweeds.
So in this beach we find lots of things that look like this. A really old bottle that was probably tossed into the inlet a long time ago, and we can see there's a few clams squirting next to us. That is now totally covered with different types of barnacles. Maybe looks like a few patches of bryozoans. There's some algae, some ulva growing on top of it, and it's filled with sand, but a nice old bottle. And we can also see from looking around us that underneath all of this, there are actually quite a few different species of clams that call this beach home. And so we can see some of them are just squirting up from under the water there as the tide is slowly coming in. And when we look on the beach, we can see shells of clams that have since passed away. So what I'm holding in my hand here looks like a type of butter clam and maybe also a little neck clam. So other things we see when we're on this beach are old bits of brick, because there actually used to be a brick factory nearby, and we can see there are some tiny little crabs that I just evicted from underneath their home. So this is the shoreline area that is close to the old dock, and then just maybe 100 yards down the beach there was also a cement factory. And the further away we walk down the shore from those old sites, even though you can't really see them anymore, the traces of them still remain in what kind of sediment is on the ground. And so here there's a lot of old it's not a fully natural kind of beach. There are still clams and that type of thing growing here, but they're growing amidst traces of some pollutants, lots of the old brick and clinkers that were used in the cement factory, really heavily changed sort of shoreline. And the further away from this I walk, the more we'll see the sediment and the stands start to change and look a bit more natural. So as you can still see, we still have bits of old bottles, bits of brick and tile, but we've really changed. The sediment of the beach is now this more thick, sort of mucky sand that has a lot of, ooh, it's almost clay. It's really sticking to my shoes. And we can also see that there's a lot of animals living in this, and so we can see a lot of holes, which probably will lead down to different types of clams and bivalves that are all using those holes to continue breathing while the tide is out. So digging around in this mud, you come up with some interesting things. I found this oyster that's still alive, and I also just uncovered a bit of a bloodworm. And so these worms are a bright red color. So they sometimes bite, so I'm not going to handle it. Bloodworms can handle pretty high levels of pollutants in the substrate that they're living in, and so these can sometimes be an indicator when we find bloodworms and not a whole lot else that this area still has some pollutants in it. So as you can see here, under the rocks, there are some ochre stars. And so these animals are fearsome predators, but right now they're tucked up, hidden out of the way during the low tide, and when the water comes in and floods these rocks, they'll be out hunting, probably eating some of these oysters that are on the rocks and pillars where they are hiding. And here we have, exposed in the low tide, a somewhat unusual creature for this area. This is a plumose anemone that's all tucked up on this rock. So when we started today, we are over on this section of beach, and as you can see, carrying along, there's something that looks very different. So 3 years ago, this section of the beach was dug out and replaced with a whole bunch of gravel and sand, and that was done in part because the sediments that were left behind by the old cement factory were really toxic, and that was harmful both to people visiting and to the animals living here. And so this beach here is one of the examples of how people and restoration groups are working really hard to try and increase the health of our coastlines and beaches. Another really cool project at Tod Inlet is all of the nest boxes that were put up for purple martins. And so these are birds that will travel really great distances to nest here in the spring and summertime. And so all of the nest boxes were put up on this old pier, and they're being really well used. So if you can actually hear the birds singing and calling as they go and pick up bugs and insects for food. Remember to take care of yourself on the beach, look after your own safety, and of course respect all of the animals that live on these beaches and make them their home.
Hello, my name is Yuko. I am one of the Seaquarists with Seaquaria Ocean Education. Today I'll be taking you on a low tide exploration here in Sydney, which is on the southern tip of Vancouver Island. The beach that I am currently on is right by the Lochside Walkway. I don't think there's an official name for this beach. I think I've heard people refer to it as the Tullista Park Beach. I am also currently on the traditional territory of the WSANEC First Nations. And this beach is a pebbly/sandy beach, so I am expecting to find animals hiding buried in the sand underneath seaweeds or underneath rocks that I find. A really great thing about this beach is known for its algal growth. That means it is covered right now in seaweeds. I will have a clip that I will take of just how extensive the seaweed cover is on this beach. This beach here is known for its algal growth. As you can see, I am right by the water line right here, and I am just surrounded by beautiful alga or sea lettuce, some kelp, and even some sargassum, which is the Japanese wireweed here. So when you're on the beach and you're exploring, looking for animals, a great place to look is under the seaweeds or the algae. You flip them over and you often find animals sheltering from the sun here. Often the temperature underneath seaweeds are much cooler than air temperature, so it helps keep these animals cool and helps them stay moist. So here I found a snail, so I'm being very gentle. Look at that beautiful shell. So that orange bit right there, that is called the operculum. It's kind of like the front door to the snail's home. When they close it up, it helps them conserve water inside their shells so that they don't dry out, and it also protects them from predators that might try to invade their home. When you're exploring the beach, you have to be patient and you also have to look very carefully. I almost missed this guy right here. That is a mossy chitin. It blended right in with the color of the rocks and its surrounding and the color of the sand. And right next to it, I believe we have a northwest ugly clam. Terrible name for a clam, I know. I found a baby sea urchin. Beautiful. I'm going to put it back in the water where I found it without removing anything off of its body, just in case it has the function to help keep it alive or it's eating. As I was walking along the edge of the water, I spotted this big rock. Doesn't look like there's much life on the rock except for the usual barnacles. There's a really big empty one right there. But then I took a look underneath this big rock. There's a huge crevice, and I thought to myself, oh, it's such a big crevice, there shouldn't be any animals living in there. I was wrong. There are plenty of ochre stars just hanging out underneath this giant rock. Look at that. Can't quite see what that orange bit is, but it might be a sea cucumber. Beauty. So here I have found a sea cucumber. I am very, very excited to find them. So I disturbed him a little bit, which is why he is contracting. He doesn't have eyes, or I should say it doesn't have eyes, so it can't tell that I mean it no harm. Fun fact about sea cucumbers, they breathe out of their back ends. I urge everyone to go out and check out their local beaches and coastline this World Oceans Week, June 7th to June 14th. And don't forget, when you go out, to take care of yourselves, bring a bottle of water, wear proper footwear, and also to respect all the animals that you find. Don't take anything home. Just view with your eyes and leave them be. Take some photos and share with us by hashtagging Seaquaria Learning and tagging us on Instagram. I would love to see what everyone can find during the week.
Hey, my name is Maia and I'm here at Kitty Islet, which is located in Oak Bay, the traditional territory of the Lekwungen people. And for Oceans Week Victoria, I'm working with my colleagues at Seaquaria Ocean Education and World Fisheries Trust to explore what we can find in the intertidal zone. Let's get started. We are not alone today at low tide. We've got this beautiful great blue heron who is very slowly walking through the algae in search for little fish like sculpin, gunnels, anything that might make a tasty breakfast. Well, looks like you might have got something. Have a good breakfast, great blue heron. Already we found quite a few different species of interesting intertidal animals. Under the rock hanging off there are some aggregating anemones. Quite a few of them, all in their little colony. We also have barnacles and limpets on this rock. Looks like we're going to have to watch where we step here at Kitty Islet. There are aggregating anemones everywhere. And although they are very hardy, we want to try and do as little damage as possible. So when you come to the beach during World Oceans Week, make sure you walk low and slow. We don't want to be running over any of these animals. Not to mention that there's probably a whole pile hiding under the rocks as well. Different crabs, maybe even fish, like the sculpin. So we do want to be careful. Okay, so as we are walking towards the water here, all over this rocky, muddy area, we can see different types of algae and seaweed. There's drift eelgrass that's come in from farther out, and there's also a whole pile of sea lettuce. And the sea lettuce and the eelgrass, this provides a really great habitat for a huge amount of biodiversity in the intertidal zone. So even though we're not that far from the shoreline, we're already seeing just tons of different types of crabs. We have all of these beautiful aggregating anemones, different worms, barnacles, limpets, really everything you can find. And a good way of looking for these things is to kind of lift up some of the algae to see what's underneath. But if you do that, do make sure to put it back, because the algae actually provides a protective barrier between the animal and the hot sun, which we don't have today, but still we want to make sure to protect everything.
So we see some very nice things here. So these are anemones that are particularly abundant here. They're the aggregating anemone. They are full of little algae, phytoplankton, which makes them green. So they both photosynthesize, make energy from the sun when there is sun, and eat little critters. If we look underneath the rock here, there's all kinds of barnacles on the top, and underneath there's also all kinds of these little hermit crabs that have taken over the shells of some of the littorina, the small snails. And there's all kinds of little shore crabs as well. They've scattered a bit. These are the Oregon shore crab, the little green one. And you get all sizes of them. And when we put the rock back, we put it back carefully so we don't squish too many things. And some of these rocks, they have an abundance of little flatworms that actually eat some of the barnacles. Whoa, look at all those crabs.
They're scattering so much.
Wow.
Okay, so here, because we're in a muddier area, we can see that there's actually quite a few holes in the sand. And these are made by different kinds of bivalves, different clams. I'm not going to dig one up at the moment.
We can see the shells there in the background.
But we can see a lot of the shell hash in the background. This is a place where a lot of birds will come and eat whatever they can find, including some of the clams. They might dig some up. So really quite a productive space underneath the muck as well as on top of it.
And this is where the villagers would come and collect clams for them to eat. And so in the background here on the island, we have a large, the top of the island, There's got large deposits of shell debris from when people came by here, midden.
What you looking for, Yogi?
Well, there's some leather leather limpets underneath.
And those are the air-breathing limpets, right?
Yeah, so we see lots of these little, this is a lacuna, which is a small snail that lays these wonderful round donut egg cases that are about 3 times its own size.
That's a lot of eggs.
Sometimes people think that they're herring eggs, but they're not. Turns out they're not.
Huh.
You see lots of different snails here actually. Look at that. They're slightly different ones. And it's really moist and cold underneath here. The barnacles, large barnacles, which are some of the algae, of course, is growing on the barnacles, so it's kind of a two-way relationship going on. And somewhere in here there are these air-breathing limpets.
Is that one of them?
No,
No.
these were snails.
If we find one, we'll let you guys know. Look what I found!
Okay.
Wow, it's a burrowing sea cucumber. There's actually 2 of them in here. One is harder to see, but this first one has its feeding branches, which are this beautiful orange frond looking thing that's retracting now. And the rest of the body is wedged under the rock. And in the distance we find the elusive blood star hanging out on top of the algae. That's quite beautiful. I've not actually seen one out of low tide before, so that's a really fun thing to see. Hello, blood star.
Here we have a lower tide pool next to the rocks. All that sand is barnacles that have broken off with over time, and it also forms a rich kind of beach, a bit different from the one that we saw at the other spot, which was quite muddy. And then it goes into the rockweed zone. Below that, more of this nori, the sushi algae. And below here, the barnacles and the diatoms that grow in this area because of the high nutrients.
So what Yogi is doing right now is he's actually setting up what's called a plankton tow. So the net that he's holding will be submerged in the water so that the flow of the water can go through the net, and plankton and any other kind of interesting bits of biodiversity, copepods, maybe some sediment, who knows what we'll get, will actually get filled up as the water is passing through it. And the idea is that the water will get pushed through the net because it's a very fine mesh, but anything that is too big to be caught by the mesh or to go through the mesh will actually end up in the little container at the end of it.
So that one is a zooplankton net. It's about 350 microns.
Okay.
And it'll catch little fish and shrimp and
Okay.
krill, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And jellyfish, so we've got a solid end on it, so that the jellyfish don't get damaged. And this one here is a phytoplankton net, which catches smaller things, so it'll also catch some of the the larvae from clams and oysters.
Okay.
We're particularly interested in the timing of the oyster larvae.
Okay.
Here in the crevice, gooseneck barnacles, so they're very distinctive of areas where there's good surge, or on the west coast we see quite a bit of these where there's good surf. And so the current coming by here, once it comes in, will feed these gooseneck barnacles. This is another item that gets easily overfished. including here in Victoria. The other interesting part here is that we have very high intertidal pools here. This particular one is just crammed with the coralline algae. And very distinctive of this spot is these pools. And one of the California mussels, a young one, up on the top end. That's really interesting, high intertidal habitat. And then we get a little bit lower in the surf grass. In this case, no, surf grass has been damaged by the sun. At this time of year, where the tides, low tides are in the summer. Are during the day. The sun does quite a bit of damage. And of course it changes into a slightly different combination of algae. Quite a bit of this nori, the algae, the sushi algae, growing all over here. And then of course really abundant barnacles because of the current. You can see the current just offshore here, nipping by.
Wouldn't want to go on a swim in that.
Well, unless you want to go somewhere.
Yeah. Wow, look at all of
the Kitty chitons in this. The black chitons are sort of in this zone. Quite a number of these California mussels. Once we go on the inside, there's more an introduced mussel now, which is a Mediterranean mussel, and it's hybridizing with the other native mussel from more sheltered waters, which is different from the East Coast mussel. So at the moment we have kind of a mix of the introduced East Coast mussel and the California and the Mediterranean mussels here on the docks in the harbor. So in this portion in here, this is a bit of a backwater from the current going by. So algae drifts in from that's been torn up from subtidally there. One of these is a 5-ribbed kelp, and that makes kind of a sub-story underneath the main kelp forest. So it's an important sort of sub-canopy. There's another one which we don't see one here right now, but the Pterogophora, which is almost like a palm tree, but it grows for many years. You can find that goes on the trunks on the beach, and it can be used for firewood. But so this one is a 5 ribbed kelp. Growing with it quite often is that laminaria that we were talking about. Here's some of that. So a version of this is called sugar kelp, but I think this is a different species. But it's used for kombu in the Asian cuisine. Another interesting one is this one here, which is called an acid weed, because it releases sulfuric acid when it gets damaged.
And that can cause damage to other types of kelp, right?
That's right. When it washes up on the beach, in the sun, and this will speed up the decomposition of all the other kelps, as well as kill animals. This piece here, this is a piece of the bull kelp, one of the blades of a bull kelp, and you can see there's a darker piece in here that's fallen out over here, and those are the seeds.
Can you hold it up to the sun a bit? Yeah. Oh yeah, we can see it very clearly there.
So that's what drops off, and it goes to the bottom of the floor, and out of that the next life stage of the kelp develops. In particular here, we see a variety of different crabs. So we'll lift up one of these rocks. That doesn't break my back. We see a variety of things. Of course, the chitons again, a bunch of amphipods, which we call beach hopper varieties. But what's distinctive here is, if we can find them, are porcelain crabs. So these are, there was one.
And some fish.
the orange sponge again that we were talking about. A couple of little blennies. This is one of the places where, now this is a young one.
And look, is that breadcrumb sponge?
That's breadcrumb sponge.
Yeah.
Oh, here's a shore crab, one of the ones that's more oceanic. So on the other part we saw more of a freshwater one, the Oregon shore crab. That one is. And there's a different type of shore crab here, a Lophopenaeus they call him. So he's got little black claws, has a completely different personality, but very common here.
So this is a piece of acid weed that's actually started decomposing, so you can see the change in coloration of the blades, and that's what's releasing the sulfuric acid.
So it's also called color changing algae.
Really the amazing thing about coming out to the beach at low tide is you can see just how varied life is here, right close to where we live. I mean, you can see behind me there are houses all along here. We're just in Oak Bay, and it's just amazing. So if you have a chance this week during World Oceans Week Victoria, try your best to get out at low tide. Check, just do a Google search, see what Victoria tides are like, see when the low tide is. They're usually during the day this time of year. Get on some sturdy shoes and come down to the beach. I hope you really enjoyed this video. Yuko, Zoe, Yogi, and I have really enjoyed making it for you, and we'd love to see what you guys find at the beach. Take a picture, share it with us. You can send it to us at education@seaquaria.org, or you can tag us on Instagram. You can use the hashtag Seaquaria Learning or hashtag OceansWeekVictoria. Thank you guys so much for joining us today.